Just to mention that we understand that the national security team, as you would expect, is at the White House. Don't know if they're meeting in the Situation Room, the Oval Office. We continue to get some more information coming out of the White House this evening as they monitor all of this very, very closely. And we wait to get information on the damage from these missile attacks. We want to go back to Fox News correspondent Trey Yingst, who is live in Baghdad as we speak, where this attack is taking place in the country of Iraq. Trey, what are you learning now?
Martha, we are learning that according to Iranian state television, these attacks are being ordered from the control room of Iran's military directly by the supreme leader, the Ayatollah Khamenei. We cannot confirm that information, but that is coming from Iranian state television. It could simply be propaganda, or it could be something that moving forward we see of more often. Remember SOLEIMANI, the man who was killed as a result of that U.S. drone strike early on Friday of last week outside of Baghdad's international airport, was largely considered the second most powerful man in Iran when it comes to military, only second to the Ayatollah himself. So, again, those reports that he is actually ordering these attacks on that base in western Iraq that houses American troops. As you mentioned, there's also reports of a base in northern Iraq in the city of Erbil that houses American troops that's being targeted. And we're getting reports in right now from the Voice of America that just about 10 miles from here, and I looked out to try to see what we could see, there is a base housing American troops called Camp Taji that is also receiving missile fire from Iran. And that's an important note too, Martha, is that the types of projectiles that are being used, actually shooting missiles from Iranian territory into Iraq, is a totally different thing than the region has seen previously. And remember, we talked about this timeline before of the initial strike by an Iranian-backed Iraqi Shia militia group in Iraq that killed an American contractor and injured 4 U.S. service members. Those were just rockets. That was very small compared to what we are seeing fired tonight, and they were fired by an Iranian-backed militia group, Kataib Hezbollah. The Iranian regime actually firing their own missiles from their own territory towards a base that houses American troops is a major escalation. And we talk about the issue of American allies in the region and how they will respond. We can assume that they are being updated, especially countries like Israel, on what the Americans know about this attack tonight. I spoke earlier this year with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, asking him about the possibility of striking Iran within its own borders. He said that is not something he would rule out, and as we know, President Trump is not ruling that out either. He reconfirmed today that he would be willing to strike Iranian cultural sites in Tehran or other places within Iran. That, too, is something that is going to be seen by the Iranians as something potentially they will fear, but obviously as a result of what we are seeing tonight, not something that they feel they're unprepared for. All of this is certainly, it's hard to put it into perspective, but when you step back and you see what is happening tonight, ongoing missile attacks towards Iraqi bases that house American troops, this is exactly the type of nightmare scenario that President Trump outlined, that Secretary Pompeo outlined, that Secretary Esper outlined, that the United States would respond to. The White House confirmed he is meeting with his national security team, and he's being briefed on the situation. But the president earlier this week said he would be responding to any sorts of provocations like this if Americans were targeted. We do know that there are American soldiers at that base. There are reports coming in from other outlets that there have been casualties on the Iraqi side. Specifically on the Iraqi side, there's no word yet on Americans at this base, but many of these bases, they house a mixture of Iraqis and Americans, mostly in the fight against the Islamic State. There are also other countries that have troops in the region assisting American coalition forces in the fight against ISIS, including Canada. Canada announcing today that they'd be moving their troops to neighboring Kuwait. They will be joining more than 3,000 U.S. troops that were deployed there last week by President Trump as a result of these ongoing threats by the Iranians. The next step and what happens in the morning, no one knows. And we don't even know if this attack tonight is over yet. Again, there are reports that missiles are still being fired into Iraqi territory. Some reports just miles away from where we're standing right now, an Iraqi base with American troops reportedly being hit as we speak, Martha.
Trey, you bring up our regional allies and the Iran guards who are putting out statements, obviously, you know, to some extent trying to capitalize as much as possible on this opportunity this evening with the firing of these missiles, warning U.S. regional allies that they will be attacked if their countries are used for attacks against Tehran. And you mentioned the Canadian forces moving to Kuwait, and there's been so much discussion about whether or not the United States will stay in Iraq. All of this provides an opportunity for Iran's leadership to try to clear the deck in terms of the United States and allies in the area. The president making it very clear that the suggestion that was kind of misfired from the Pentagon yesterday is actually not the case at all, that the United States is committed to staying and protecting and standing with our Iraqi allies and the soldiers that we've trained there. What's the feeling on the ground about all of that tonight?
Well, look, the Iranians have been trying to increase their foothold in the Middle East for some time now. Many analysts in the region describe the possibility of Americans being forced out of Iraq as a posthumous victory for Qasem Soleimani, who was killed last week, the top leader in Iran's military, because this is exactly what he wanted. He wanted the Middle East to be free for Iranian expansion. And we talk about proxies in the region that could threaten U.S. allies. Looking specifically at Israel, you look at the places that surround Israel, Lebanon, you have Hezbollah, a group that is funded by the Iranians. Inside the Gaza Strip, we've reported extensively there, interviewing senior leadership in Palestinian Islamic Jihad and Hamas. Both groups have confirmed to Fox News in the past year that they are receiving weapons and money from the Iranian regime. Additionally, there are Iranian-backed militias in Syria, in Iraq. So this is all up in the air as to what happens next. But there is this question of, could this turn into a larger regional conflict that would include Iranian proxies? Before, we were talking about the possibility of simply a proxy war. Now, Iran firing missiles from their own territory towards American forces in the Middle East ratchets everything up a notch. And so that is the big question about where does this go tomorrow. We will have to wait and see. Martha.
Yeah. All right, Trey, thank you so much. Trey Yingst reporting live tonight from Baghdad, also reporting that that there are reports of missiles just miles from where he is in Baghdad, and we know that we have two Iraqi bases that house United States servicemen and personnel that have been attacked this evening, and no reports at this point so far of casualties that we can confirm at this point.